Welcome to the Mornings with Matt Career Podcast. Today I'm joined by Matthew Espinoza. Matthew is a Web 3.0 builder and full stack developer. He has a verified personal token, $Matt token, and has grown his social token company, Agora Labs, to a 500K market cap within 72 hours of launching. He's also one of the youngest people to be a finalist for top founder competitions, including Next 36 and Zed Fellows. Currently, he operates one of the largest Web3 newsletters and actively teaches others how to join this emerging Web3 space. Thanks for coming in today, Matt.
Thank you so much for being here.
If you like what you hear today and you want to learn more, check out our website, morningswithmattp.com. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at morningswithmattp, and add me on LinkedIn, Matt Parkin. So Matt, to get us started today, can you give a bit of background in terms of what is Web3?
Yeah, so the best way to kind of explain Web3 and most exciting way to explain it is that it's a new rise of the internet. So we've had Web 1. So Web 1 is which is often known as just reading. So that's like the reading basis. And so reading would be just a Google, and then Web 2 would be the social media platforms you guys are on. So this would be Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. This is where now these big corporations actually have your data. And so Facebook, the huge controversy around Facebook having its own data and taking users' data. That's like Web 2 phase. And now we're moving on to the Web 3 side of things. And the biggest difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is that with Web 3 you actually own certain parts. You own everything. You own your own data. You don't have to give your data to someone else. And so if you look at NFTs, and I'm more than happy to kind of deep dive into that later on, NFTs is an ownership based of the internet. And I want you guys to think of NFTs like just owning a piece of art. You're actually owning like a part of the internet. And that part of the internet just happens to be represented as an art piece. That's the best way to visualize what that is versus just like a long hash code of numbers and letters. Visually, it's best to show it as art, which is why NFTs are attributed to art. But at the end of the day, NFTs are just non-fungible tokens. And these are tokens that you can actually own yourself.
So the big thing that I'm hearing with Web3 is decentralization. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So decentralization, like the basic definition, is just users pretty much owning their own data. And so with decentralization, there's no one governing entity kind of commanding everything. There's no huge, FANG or tech company kind of owning people's data. You own your own data, and you can kind of play around with that, and you can do some really cool stuff with that. And a lot of platforms have been built based off decentralization and ownership.
And for people who are interested in doing their own stuff in Web3, can you walk us through like what type of roles are available if someone says, I'm interested in Web3, where can I start?
Yeah, so there's like two, so I guess getting started into Web3, most of Web3 lives in Twitter and it also lives on Discord. And so it hasn't fully adopted over to LinkedIn or Facebook yet, although you see a little bit of here and there. But most prominently, people are getting hired just through Discord DMs. I can think of like 92% of all my friends who are in the Web3 space haven't got hired by applying on a LinkedIn. They haven't got hired just by reaching out to someone random. They got hired because they were in a Discord community, they were active, they showed interest, and then when the time was right, they messaged either the core team or one of the people who represent the Discord server, and it said, hey, do you have any openings for this organization or this this club that I'm in? And so then from there they had a chat and then they had an interview. In fact, the thing about Web3 is that some people don't even have like what's cool about Web3 is that with ownership, it also means that because you have your own data, you don't have to give your data to someone else. People are getting jobs without any like due diligence on themselves. So there's something called an anon, so ANON in Web3, which means that so I can apply as an anon. So an anon would just mean that when I give someone my resume, my background, I don't have to show my name or show my credentials at all. It just kind of shows like where I've worked in the past, and it's kind of like it's ownership based, a way to give a resume.
Very interesting. I wonder, do you think there could be applications for that anon piece outside of the Web3 space for kind of reinventing the future of job applications across industries?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have at least two of my friends are building a startup right now where they're focused on just the idea of anon accounts, where anon accounts are having a very difficult time finding jobs. But a lot of people in Web3 don't want to give out their identity because sometimes with their identity comes, okay, this guy's a lot of money, or like this guy, like might have some controversies in the past. And so a lot of it is unregulated in some ways, but also the people behind it, you don't really know who they are. So that's something that's quite important within the space. And so I do know some platforms that are upcoming where they become a little bit more like proof that you have to work. You have to show proof in some way that you worked at a company. You can't just say you worked at Facebook or you worked at Google and then give the application to someone else. There's some platforms now that you have to verify on the blockchain through some sort of work employment that you actually worked at these places. And that way, when you send a link from that platform to someone else, they can say, okay, this is verified that this person is actually legit, even if you don't feel comfortable giving the name out.
Very, very cool. I want to talk more about this offline because that piques my interest, but we'll keep it moving for those who aren't as interested in the job application part of things. So I've heard this term floating around DAOs, right? Can you share a little bit more info with our audience about DAOs and kind of what that employment landscape looks like in the space?
Yeah, for sure. So DAOs, the basis of it, the definition is just decentralized autonomous organization. But in a more literal sense, it's the best way to kind of explain it. It's just the Web3 organization, which means it's full ownership based. And so with a DAO, there's often a token. So you can imagine, let's say, for example, let's say tomorrow Facebook decides, we're not going to be a company anymore. We're not going to have any stockholders or shareholders. We're just going to become a DAO. So this would mean that Facebook would have to have its own token attributed to this organization, and the employees have the option to then buy this token. Pretty similar to how stock shares normally work, except with of a DAO component, most of the time it's actually held within a Discord server. And so this Discord server would represent this DAO. So there's a lot of DAOs out there right now. There's a developer DAO that I'm a part of, and I'm actually engineering some work for them as well. There's a DAO called FWB, super popular. There's a DAO for Y Combinator. And so these DAO organizations are instead of run by the founders of this organization, the DAO is actually run by the people who have either the most tokens or the people who contribute the most. So instead of thinking, okay, I'm going to work for someone because he started this company, and now you're flipping the model around, is that the people work together based off how much work they put into it. So it's kind of a flipped model of how work is now being attributed. And so going back to how to break into Web3, the best way to break into Web3 is actually contributing to these DAOs. And by that, you're then showing the contributors and these core team members that you're actually active, you actually do want to work here. And then when the time is ready to say you have any openings, you could then have it more of a permanent role within that DAO. So it's a very interesting model versus just, I believe that you're going to do well. It's now, you've shown me you've done well, and now let's hire.
Interesting. So it's almost like a trial in a way where people can come in and kind of show what they've got and contribute to it. And then from there, they can say, okay, it makes sense to bring you on for long periods of time.
Exactly. And it's also really important to note is that with these DAOs, most of the time you're not paid regular currency, rather like it's called fiat. So fiat just means like cash. It's like the crypto term. Just means cash. And so most of the time you're not paid fiat or cash. You're actually paid based off the token. And so instead of getting paid maybe $500 in just like regular cash, you get paid $500 in Facebook DAO. And so today the Facebook DAO may be worth $500 per one token or one share. So maybe you get one token that's worth $500, that's your payment. But tomorrow or maybe next week, that $500 might be worth $1,000. And so the reason they give you based off token is because they actually have full ownership pool of the token. And so from a contributor and also from a core team member perspective, because they own the tokens and the tokens have value, it's easy for them to give out tokens and you still get money, and they still don't have to give up their own equity and their own money from that.
Very interesting. So if someone was interested in, potentially going and contributing to a DAO, but they aren't a techie, they haven't studied computer science, they can't code anything to save their lives. Are there other kind of roles in the space that people can look at getting into?
Yeah, so there's two main roles I think are super prominent in the Web3 space. The first one is, like you mentioned, software focused. So software developers are very common within the space, but also on the opposite side of things, there is a growth / community focused, because with these DAOs, a huge part of it is being active. And so a lot of DAOs, either they are made too early, or the activity dies off, and so the token dies off. And as a core team member, you don't want that happening. And so we have these community members themselves that are actually running these DAOs, and they also are not techie at all. There's some really good organizations. I'm part of one called Safari Club. I believe it's just safariclub.web3. And so this is a group community that actually shares, who are not technical people, that kind of share how to actually grow a platform, how to get people active, how to like set up events. And so those are also very common within the Web3 space.
Very cool. That'll definitely be helpful for people who are looking at, breaking into the space, but don't have the tech background to do so. And for those who are looking into breaking into the space, are there any resources? So you mentioned Safari Club. Are there any other things that people should check out to learn more about the space?
Yeah, sure. I personally also have my own guide. I just started making it myself. I just kind of taking everything I know into one kind of nice little PDF guide that people can kind of read and kind of continue looking back at. And people can find that at web3club.vip. And right now it's pre-order, so you get it like a pretty cheap price. And then moving forward, it'd probably be the full amount.
Awesome. So get on that now before that price goes up. I'm sure that'll be a helpful resource for people who are interested in learning more about that space. And aside from those resources, what are like 3 super simple steps that people can take right after they finish listening to this podcast to get their foot in the door in the whole crypto and Web3 space?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for Web3, I would say, is just updating your handles, especially on Discord and Twitter, and even on like LinkedIn, if you'd like, just putting Web3 somewhere as a key term and keyword. It's even, I've seen accounts that are like learning Web3, or a very common term is called going down the Web3 rabbit hole. And so even putting that in some sort of way on your bio, in your description, just kind of boosting those results for yourself is a huge first step. I know some people who just having that in their bio to get employers like looking at like, hey, I know you're getting into Web3. How familiar are you with it so far? Maybe let's have a conversation. So that's a really good first step. And the second biggest thing is around Web3 lingo. And so the Web3 world has a lot of terms. I mentioned a couple today, like fiat just means cash. There's another term that I love that I use all the time called WAGMI. It just means we're all going to make it. It's like a short term. It's kind of like a positive reinstatement. So there's a huge list of Web3 terms. And so when you're going through job applications or even just like through Discord servers, you're going to see a lot of this lingo. And so I do recommend looking at different websites to find those lingos beforehand. That way you actually know what you're actually getting into and what people are actually talking about in these conversations.
WAGMI, Matt. Thank you for all of your insights today. If you like the podcast, make sure to share it with your friend and leave a review. Stay tuned for next week's episode. If you found it helpful, make sure to follow us on social media platforms. Add me on LinkedIn, Matt Parkin. Check out our Instagram and TikTok at Mornings with Matt P, and check out our website at morningswithmattp.com. See you next week.